and welcome to the latest episode of Two Wizards and a Mic, where two older people, who still like to play D&D, are going to tell you all about how amazing the game is and how you can play it better. I am Shane,
And I am Andrew.
and I just wanted to point out that this episode, as of 2 days ago, I think, we've been doing this for one whole year.
Wow.
41 episodes of D&D Pearls of Wisdom.
In
So
52
just
weeks.
That's right. And I gotta say, it's been fun, and I am going to continue doing it for the next 25 years. So,
So
who
that'll
knows?
make
Actually,
me 89.
excellent. And
Not really.
we'll probably be laying in some sort
Almost.
of pods where all of it will
Yeah.
be done through virtual reality or something
No, don't
weird.
even go down that street. No, we're going back. We're going backwards. The grid is going to go down and we're just going to record it on tape and mail it out.
So, if you want to get your copies of episodes 600 through 900, make sure to send a self-addressed stamped envelope,
That's
which
right.
half the people listening would not be like, a what? A
Oh,
what?
they'll
A
know
what?
then.
Oh yeah, by then that's true.
Oh, yeah.
So this week we're talking about one of my favorite things to talk about in terms of D&D is traps. And start us off. What should players and especially game masters, DMs, know about traps?
Sure. So I'm going to quickly do a quick Kickstarter update as well,
Right.
because
Sorry.
I know the backers are interested. The Feyland 2 book, the last print should arrive here at the office any day. Could be tomorrow, probably by the end of
Excellent.
this week, and then we'll start shipping the hardcover and softcover books. And then the new Kickstarter probably launch late February, early March, and that's going to be Monsters of the Dungeon. So
Dun
traps,
dun
yes.
dun.
Now, I always have loved traps as a player, as a DM. You can put them almost anywhere. You can use them as obstacles. You can use them as challenges for the more thinking type of player. Um, in general, there are mechanical traps and there are magical traps. The most famous adventure, one of the most famous modules ever, is Tomb of Horrors, which is filled with traps. It's not actually really supposed to be a regular adventure. Shane and I were just speaking about this before we started. It was originally a tournament module where Gary Gygax was trying to challenge some players with really high level characters, who thought they were, the best thing since sliced bread. And he was going to slice their characters instead. And yeah, so that's what it was intended. It was intended also to show that it's really important to be a thinking player and to ask good questions to the DM and consider what's going on in your environment. But Tomb of Horrors filled with nasty, challenging traps. Um, there are also a bunch of books called the Grim Tooth Trap books, which are filled with mostly more complicated traps. And you can pick those up on Drive Through RPG, the PDFs, for about $5. So that's not too bad. Um, in fifth edition, there's a Grim Tooth. This is one of the books. Then there's
Cool.
our yeah, I think there's about a dozen of them at least, and they give you like a description, and then there's usually a little drawing or a quick illustration of what the trap is going to be like.
The infamous wheel trap.
Yeah. So in fifth edition, they're a little bit different. They're um, a lot more player friendly, and there's good things about that, and there's bad things about that. So sometimes you get to make a dexterity save in 5e to avoid traps because of your quick reflexes. Sometimes you can make a constitution save against poison. However, I wouldn't use saves all the time. It would depend on the
Right.
situation. Um, they can also be detected and disabled. So the dungeon master decides beforehand how hard it's going to be, the DC for the trap. 5 is really easy, 20 is pretty hard. And also you could decide on a DC to see how difficult it is to disable it, as well as find it. You can also use the character's passive perception. Um, I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes that passive perception is the only way you can find things. That's not true. A player can also say, I want to make an investigation check or a wisdom perception check or insight check. All those ways the player can be active and involved. And there is a bit of a kind of a more modern take on traps that they're bad because they can hurt your player. Well, yeah, that's the point.
I just want to actually, I'm going to make a point on that
Sure.
is that the word used to describe the very thing that apparently are bad are traps.
Yeah.
So they're set on purpose by the villain or some sort of villainous faction because they don't want you going where you want to go,
Yeah.
and I have read that as well online about people saying that traps are. I've heard them described as they're just unfair.
Yeah.
Where in my sort of encounters with traps in the last few years, generally speaking, they're pretty mild. It's like, oh, I took a bit of poison damage, or this, or oh, I got sliced, or where a lot of traps. I think traps have sort of fallen out of favor with the core sort of adventures, at least from my perspective. I haven't actually looked or noticed looking at the new version of Tomb of Horrors, where you had traps that just kills you outright
Yeah.
and sucks to be you. I don't know if they've milded those.
Yeah.
Milded?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They
they
have?
did.
Oh,
Yeah.
darn.
I think part of it sometimes is people don't read the rules. So if you look in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's a section on traps and the severity. Yeah, for first to fourth level, usually maximum 4d10, usually 1d10 or 2d10. So still pretty bad, but not like horrible. 5 to 10, you can get up to 10d10 for a deadly trap. So that's pretty nasty. And then much higher for a levels 11 above, which most people don't play. I think that's part of the reason there's so few people playing high levels that they don't get to see those really bad traps. I mean, it gets up to 24 d10 with level 17 and above. 24 d10, so 240 maximum. So many times these traps are connected, obviously, like Shane said, to blocking you from going somewhere, guarding something like a treasure vault. Um, Often they're part or connected to a treasure chest.
Yes.
Some locations are also booby trapped. The whole place is just booby trapped to maim, or kill player characters. I think too, you make a good point about traps in the way they can be overdone, and if you're just getting traps that are taking characters down all the time, I think they can be overdone. However, I think they're fun and they keep people on their toes, and I think that's part of what has changed is that the game is less tactical and strategic now,
Yeah.
and I think the game is more fun when it is.
I agree because if you're just hacking and slashing and barging through the door and smashing things, I mean, most often there's going to be maybe a minute or two of discussion at the most about
Right.
how to go. We're going to go through this door. Great. We've never been through this door, everybody. Just, and we've been told and learned about the local lore that says if you try to open this door, it explodes, the mountain comes to life, and then eats us. So perhaps we should, I don't know, find another entrance or potentially, and you're right, because the whole strategic part, I think you're right, gets lost a lot of the
Yeah.
time, and you are completely uh, there. When there's nothing to fear, that is when the game gets really boring,
Yeah.
and the practice of being aware that something could hurt your character when you walk around the corner. Um, I mean, quite often in the adventures that you run, we're poking the floor. We're looking for pressure plates. We're doing things like that.
Mhm.
However, when I started a couple days ago looking at traps in D&D and kind of refamiliarizing myself with Tomb of Horrors, specifically the old DM, the old book, the we never really look up. We don't really look sideways. We're
Mhm.
always looking at the floor because that's the
Mhm.
usual place, because we're afraid of falling into a pit. But yeah, I mean, that to me just expresses that when you run a game, that we are aware stuff's going to happen, but we are kind of lazy about it too, because some of the traps are swinging devices that come from around a corner and
Mhm.
have spikes on them and things like that. Most of the time, we're looking at the floor, just plundering along, and then suddenly we're not paying attention to something that's going to seriously hurt. So yeah, I think we need more fear in the game, and I think traps is only one way to do it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Yeah, it's not the only way. And I think that the old dungeon crawl model is the one that the reason we did it all the time in the 70s and 80s was because it worked and it was fun. And that
yeah,
basic model of being more strategic, doing some reconnaissance, moving slowly from one area to another, checking it out, I think it actually makes it fun and it's more realistic, and that's why that was there. Um, so let's look at some basic traps, and then we'll look at some more complex
cool.
ones, which I think there's a lot of humor, I think, too, in traps. There's humors that crazy things happen to your character, and there's humor in the way they're designed. So I think that's part of it too that people miss. Um, so really basic trap is the pit trap. So just a pit that you could fall into. It could be hidden. It could have an illusion over it where it looks like there's grass there or a stone floor, but actually it's not. There's not. You could have spikes at the bottom of it to make it worse. You could also have monsters in there, lots of different things. You could have oozes, or you could have a monster who'd fallen in the trap already. Um, and then another thing which I've started to use is you have a locking lid. So the trap goes down, the person falls into the pit trap, it goes back up and locks. I like that quite a bit.
Which this is actually I finally just found it. This particular example here, which I think this is from Tomb of Horrors, or it might be from one of the other ones. But this one here,
Oh
which
yeah,
is sort of, it's not. I don't think this is actually the locking lid version, but
yeah,
it's definitely of that. Instead
yeah.
of you being concerned that the pit is going to have like some sort of foliage over it, these are solid floors that look great, and you
Mhm.
start walking across them, and then they just kind of open up
Yeah,
and drop you into whatever horror awaits.
yeah. It gives you a chance to, you should have rope. You hope you might have somebody who
Yeah,
has a fly spell or levitation, or it gives you a chance to do so many things to survive. Um, Then there's tripwires. Now, this is a trap that I wouldn't even use a save for because I think they're going off too fast. I think a pit trap, I would give a player in the more player friendly 5e world, I would give them a chance to make a dexterity check to grab the edge, unless I had something slippery on the edge as well. But the tripwire, I wouldn't do a save at all. It just goes off. Sorry, it's too fast. You're not going to be able to do anything about it. It could be connected to falling. It could be connected to darts, a falling block. You could have a falling net trap. Of course, there's pressure plate traps. If anybody's played Skyrim, these are everywhere. Um, and I wouldn't even have a save for a pressure plate trap too because it goes off so quick. And this
yeah.
could have poison needles connected, darts. Um, you could have a door trap, like the door could open up and the pit could be right there. The player just, and if they don't say, you know, before I go through, I look around, they're going in the pit. Um, or the door activates a pit. You go to open the door and a ceiling block falls down on you. One actually little tweak I heard one DM do was that the block didn't, often when he had things fall from the ceiling, it didn't fall at the front of the group. It would fall like 3 or 4 players back.
So
So
they open a door and somebody in the hall they were just in.
I like that.
That's what
Yeah,
these traps are supposed to do. They're supposed to be creative, and they're
exactly.
supposed to make you fear what you're adventurers. You're digging around in a dungeon. It's not like you're going to the pub down the road, which could be just, dangerous in its own way. But still.
Exactly. Exactly. You could have an incubus try to pick you up like I had a while ago. All right. So there's also swinging blades, stairs that give way, and when the stairs that give way happen, you could have spikes down below. You could have oil on the stairs. Obviously, bridges that fall apart, rope bridges or any kind of bridge.
Yeah.
Um, the falling portcullis. So this is one that's very common. So this is basically a gate that goes down, and that could trigger other things. Like maybe it closes the entrance to the dungeon as well, and now you can't get out, or it blocks off a hallway you want to go down. You could have
Like in
collapse.
little balls running from, you hear something clicking. You hear a clicking noise. It seems to be above you. A ball's running down a track, to something that's going to trigger something else.
Yeah, yeah,
That kind of
yeah,
idea.
exactly.
That
You
would be
could have
cool.
collapsing roofs, the walls that close in, like in the old Wonder Woman always used to have to deal with that. Um, Chambers flooding. So flooding with gas or with water, that's a really good one where that challenges the players in lots of different ways. I know in Skyrim, the first thing I make sure that I always have are healing potions, cure disease potions, and at least one water breathing potion.
Yeah.
Because there are
Yeah.
traps or there's times where you get caught underwater and you have no other option to do that other than to do that.
I remember being
Um,
so frustrated once with Skyrim that I re-rolled my character, started from the beginning, and I made sure that I was the lizard race, which I can't
right.
remember the name of,
Yeah.
because they're resistant to disease and they can breathe underwater.
Right.
Because I kept drowning in this one spot and like, fine, I'm just doing it again.
Yeah. 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 So it helps to have you water breathing potions or other ways of figuring out how you're going to breathe or get out of there. Um, you could have the old statue that animates trap. It could have a breath weapon. It could grapple you. There's lots you could do there. It could move and block your way out. And then there's portals. Like you could have magical portals that send you to another part of the dungeon or send you somewhere else in the world or another plane
Yeah.
even. Um, yeah, so that's a lot of the basic traps and ones that I use quite a lot. Um, the more complex ones. Okay, here's one of my favorites. I did use this on you guys once, but I'm not sure if you'll remember. So this is the countdown trap. There's lots of versions of this. So you come into a room. It can be any size, pretty much. And as soon as you go in, what the doors lock, and you see there's a lever in the middle of the room, and you hear a countdown saying 10, 9, 8.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so you've just got into this chamber with the party. There's a big lever in the middle of the room, and this countdown is going. What would you do?
Oh God. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people would just naturally just go uh, to pull the lever because
Okay,
that'll stop the
so
thing.
if you pull, say you pull that, so it's counted down 10, 9, 8, 7, and then you pull the lever, then the countdown starts again. 10, 9, 8. And you know what happens? If
No,
you
I
don't
got.
pull the lever to restart the trap, it gets to 0 and then the doors open again.
You're right. I don't remember that happening, but that's kind of awesome because
I
I
like
think
that.
knowing the players that we play with,
Yeah.
somebody probably would have pulled the lever.
Yeah, they did. I'm sure Jay and Sarah were there. Another great one is that you go into an area, and as you move through it, you discover trap after trap that's already fired, right? So there's swinging blades that have already gone off, and there's victims, maybe just a skeleton, maybe new victims. And then you find another trap, and you keep going. And as you keep going along, there's a whole series of these traps. And some people put it in a spiral. And then when you get to the end, there's treasure. Like it could be a bag of something or a treasure chest. And what happens is when you take this bag, kind of like in Indiana Jones when he takes the skull, or if you open the treasure chest, you hear this kind of large clicking sound and clunking and clanking sounds, and then you hear more and more of them. And what you've done is you've just gone into the center of the trap, and now you've reset all the traps back to the way that you came in.
Oh, that is so evil.
So that's really, really good. Really good. And you make it like they have at least half a dozen or more that they have to go through now to get back.
Why don't we see more of those? I mean, really.
Another good one. This was in one of the first series of adventures. You're in a dungeon and most of it is lit, but you get to one area where the torches are all out. There's like sconces on the wall, right? And all of a sudden you get to the place that's super dark. And you just tell the players they smell this strange odor. And the smart players will investigate and find out that it's actually they're smelling oil. And what these creatures have done is they've soaked this whole one area in oil and then put all these flammable things out in the room. So the first person who lights their torch, the whole place is going to go up.
Actually, I think you did that to us once, and I've
Yeah, you went
or
through that
like a
adventure.
variation of that, and
You
we
went through that
did
adventure for sure. The first time we went to Greyhawk.
right.
Yeah,
I think, and we did avoid it because I think one of the players knew what was up,
you did.
which
You
is
did. You
fine and
backed.
could have happened.
Yeah, you backed off, and then one player sent something into that area, and then it exploded. And then and then you after it went off, then you went through. Um, then of course the classic rolling sphere, like Indiana Jones, where you've triggered a trap, and then this giant boulder, spherical trap, comes hurtling towards you. And in a dungeon, sometimes you don't have very many places to escape to. Um, Another great one I like is that you get into a hallway, and on one side of the hallway, you see this huge monster, and then you just put a trap on the other side. So, and the monster's approaching you. So you see like, maybe a trio of minotaurs or, um, even like a mind flayer, and they're coming down the hallway towards you. The players are going to turn and bolt the other way. And there's lots of things you can do. You could put pit traps. You could put caltrops littered on the floor, so people are just running into this area. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different ways of playing that, but I like that one quite a bit because usually people um, don't figure it out. Although once you start using illusions, then people get more and more careful. Like now, my party
True.
knows, our groups usually know when they see something, maybe
Right.
check to see if that's actually there, because sometimes it's not.
I was just skimming through the Grimtooth's book, and I found one of the traps that I recognize because it always stuck with me that we don't see this enough.
Right.
Because generally speaking, most people, when they are traveling around in a dungeon, and it's like, okay, well, you can go up the stairs, you go down the stairs, but this trap, I ran into this when I was a kid. And this trap
Oh yeah.
is basically you are just climbing some stairs, which most people go, okay, I'm going to go up the stairs.
Yeah.
No thought to anything else. Just, oh, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to go up the stairs. And they step on a pressure plate and arrows hit them in the face
Yeah.
because they're right in the stairs that are sort of at eye level. And I always remembered that. And I was looking, and I just happened to see a similar sort of trap like that. And I don't know what module it was, but I remember being scared after that when
Yeah.
you're like 12 years old and your character just took 5 arrows to the face
Yeah.
because they were just going to climb the stairs. Uh, and I just love that because traps could be anywhere. You just might not even suspect because
Yeah.
characters get lazy and they're
Yeah. I think the best ones, I think this is what you're maybe talking about, are the best ones that really blend into the environment and are so well
exactly.
hidden. And you're just doing something natural that you would always do. And then that's why I like the stairs that collapse, because you don't use it all the time, but at certain places, like, especially if say you're fleeing an area you don't want to be in, and one person's on the stairs and they fall, um, and then the rest of the party has made it up above. I thought it was funny too. I've seen some takes about people who say, well, they're boring because only one player is involved in it. But that's the whole game is like that. one player has a turn at a time. One player might be speaking to an NPC at a time. Um, there's a lot of things that one player might be doing a complex spell. Um, that's just part of the game, and I think part of it is that a lot of games don't move along quick enough. The pace is too slow. But I
Yeah.
don't think, yeah, I don't see that as a problem. It's not like you're there for, you know, 5 or 10 minutes even. You're probably not even that long with one player. Usually, you again, you don't want to have the players too far apart. If you do have that, if the characters are too far apart, then there's always going to be problems. But I think the idea of one player being involved in a trap is fine. It's not going to go on for very long.
And I
Um,
think that a lot of traps, I think people's assumption about traps is that it's, oh, I'm going to open that chest. Okay, you're going to check for traps? All
yeah,
right, okay. I'm going to open that door. Are you going to check for traps? You know, and the DM should never really offer that, I don't think. To say, hey, you're going to check? No, leave it to the players to be like,
yeah,
I'm going to do the thing. And uh, like some of the, the pit traps, like the creative sliding, things pivoting and whatnot, really creates a chance for incredible creativity. How are you guys not going to die right now? Because
yeah,
the thing is opening and you see lava down below. What are you gonna do? And that is that's the essence of the game.
yeah, yeah. So other cool things to do are to have there's a floor. This is in one of the 80s modules too, where the whole floor is on a counterbalance. So unless you carefully move and balance the floor as you move across, the entire floor is going to shift. That is a good one. There's one they call acid rain, where you are going towards a statue, or well, there's a lot of ways you could do it, but one way is you go up to is it a treasure chest, and you open it up. And as you open up the treasure chest, it actually creates a slide behind you. The whole floor slopes down behind you. And then what pours out of the treasure chest is acid. And the acid slides down as you're sliding down the trap, and it's sliding down towards you. That's a good one.
Okay,
Um,
I gotta show you this one because this is exactly what you're talking about. So this is a you're looking down a hallway and then the
yeah.
hallway drops,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I
Yeah,
like
that's a
this
good
guy.
one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I love,
I
and
love the
the
picture.
reality
Yeah.
is you're invading a place that is being protected by whatever foe you're against.
Yeah.
And the foe's been there a long time, most of
Yeah.
it. It's not like they ran into a castle 20 minutes before and you're like, let's get into the castle and save the day. No, no, this is like you're going into someone else's house and
Yeah.
and they know you're coming at some point. Maybe not right now or today
Yeah.
or tomorrow, but at some point, and they could be as creative as they want with how they stop people from coming in.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Although, as we talked about last week, not most of the monsters are not that smart. So it's
true.
once you get to higher levels that it's going to be more of an issue with having really complicated ones. But simple traps can kill you too.
Oh,
Um,
well, exactly. Totally.
yeah. A
Totally.
more interesting one too is where you have one which has basically trapdoors or chutes that send multiple chutes that go down to a low level in the dungeon. And at the bottom of the chutes, there's basically, they call it like the shooting gallery. So the bottom, that's where the barracks are for the soldiers or for the orcs or whatever it is. And they're just waiting there, when they hear the shoot fire off, and they're just waiting there with, ranged weapons. And as soon as you come out at the bottom you fall down to the bottom, they open fire. So I like that too. Um, there's the second pit trap where you see where there is a pit trap in front of you, but then right behind it is another pit trap that is camouflaged. So
Those are
that,
evil.
that's a good one. Like you think, oh, I'm good. I made it. I've and then of course anti-magic zones. So these are fun where
Yeah.
maybe the magic doesn't work at all, or it works in some strange way. Um, or also the anti-gravity zones are a lot of fun too. Um,
I have
you could
encountered
have
those.
again
Yeah.
creatures on the side, who arrive, and all the players are floating in the air, and they're just there taking pot shots at them with ranged weapons as they're floating along.
I think it was
Um,
Two of Horrors where there's the dancing room. Is that am I remembering that correctly?
I would
I've
have to
forgotten which
check.
one. But there's
Yeah.
definitely a trap in one of the modules I played in the past where you walk into the room and I think there was like glowing orbs or something. There was something to attract your
Mhm.
attention. And then as soon as you got in, you just suddenly had this urge to dance or something or to run around or whatever it was.
Right.
But basically you couldn't get out of it. There was only certain ways you could do that. And but yeah, that just popped into my mind. I haven't thought of that one in years.
Yeah, it has a lot of very creative ones. There's some really cool ones. I think there's one in there where you get into this kind of chasm or big open area in the dungeon, and there's like hanging platforms, and you have to try to make your way from one to another to
I know
cross the area.
exactly the one you're talking. Yes, I
Yeah,
know exactly the one you're talking about.
so
And
that's
there's
pretty
like
fun.
water geysers or something making it slippery on the platforms or something.
Yeah,
Something was, yeah. Oh yeah. I
that's
I
a
can
good one.
see the image from the module in my head. Oh yeah, I hated that one.
There's also ways of using monsters that are, and I like these actually quite a lot too, which are traps. Obviously, the mimic is the most obvious example.
Yeah.
Um, and a mimic could be lots of different things. It doesn't have to be a treasure chest. It could be a door or a chest, chest of drawers, a bed, lots of things. Another one I like is a gelatinous cube. We've mentioned this one before briefly. You could have a gelatinous cube sitting in a pit trap.
Yes. That actually is probably one of the scariest things I can think of
Yeah,
in terms of gelatinous cube traps like that.
yeah,
You don't see them. They're just so
yeah.
not they're hard to catch.
Well, exactly. And especially like in a dimly lit dungeon, maybe you see like the dungeon master might say, "Oh, there's a coin floating in the air or a dagger," and you're like, "What? What's that?" And actually, they're inside the cube, and you can't actually see the cube clearly. Um, Another great one I love to use is the gas spore because it's basically this is how the monster is being created. It's basically supposed to be a beholder trap, so it looks quite a lot from a beholder at a distance, and so the hope is that the players will attack it. And if they're too close, when this thing is attacked and killed, it explodes like a gas explosion. I've used this. I just used this one like a couple of weeks ago, and I use this one all the time because I also love beholders. So it's again good to keep people on their toes. And another good one that I use all the time are piercers. So these are
Yeah.
the young version of the roper, and they're basically a um,
They're
stalactite
like tight, yeah.
that is hanging from the roof of a cave. So I often use them when the cave is quite high and the players can't see into the darkness that well. And then they can't do a lot. All they can do is shoot down and try to hit the players once. If they miss, their speed is so slow. I think in fifth edition, they move at 10 feet. Their speed is so slow and their armor class is so weak and they don't have many hit points that the chance that they're going to get to the wall and then get all the way back up and drop again is unlikely. So they're a one shot creature, like a kind of like a bee, right? They do their thing and then they're done. So I like having a whole bunch of those on a ceiling in a cave, and then they just rain down, and the players are like, "What is going on?" And especially combined
That's
with
what I
something
mean.
else.
They don't look up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, combined with something else too. Maybe they're fighting orcs or another creature on that, on the ground, and then all of a sudden these things start dropping through the air.
That's a very good point. That fighting a creature and having an encounter and then wandering into the lair of another creature rarely happens, but it is highly plausible. Like if you're in a
Yeah,
caving system or cave system of some sort, if you're in a dungeon that's been laid out, maybe the people wanting you to stay out, they've said, okay, well, hey, we've got these spider creatures. They're gonna live in here and breed and stuff, and they'll be, once people come through here, they'll be great. But if they want to bolt through and run through, I mean, the next thing down the road is gonna be, a gelatinous cube eating tea or having tea or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean that's totally plausible where you could be fighting an orc and then you're like, okay, guys, we got to go this way or whatever for whatever reason, and then suddenly getting a lot of pierces in the head because you've wandered into another where the orcs maybe probably don't go. They're like, no,
Yeah.
those guys are there. They're good. They can do them.
Exactly.
We'll stay over
Or
here.
they know where to go. They know like, oh, tons of orcs have been killed there. We don't walk through that way. Um, and I like that combination. I do that quite a bit, a combination of creatures. Recently I did two from our wilderness book, the bog hopper. I had two of those fighting you guys, and then a couple of dim spriggans. So
Yes.
bog hoppers are these really fast moving little fey creatures that bite and spear you with their horn and spit poison, and they're just kind of a harassing creature that's very quick and hard to get a hold of. And at the same time, they were dealing with these very large creatures that have nasty claws and send out a swarm of insects. So that was pretty much pandemonium. And it was only two of each of them. And the party was already eighth or ninth level. So technically, they should have easily been able to handle them. But the combination of the creatures made a challenge.
Well, especially since I think players. I mean, I'm picking on players today, but
Mhm.
there can be that sort of tunnel vision about the reward is over there. We're going to go get that reward, and nothing is going to stop us. We'll kill whatever gets in our way, but
Yeah.
never really consider that. Well, the thing you're trying to kill, you've made it angry because you stepped in its dinner or something. Maybe uh, 30 yards away, there's another creature that's sitting around just kind of having a rest or whatever, and it's like, what's that commotion? I'll go check it out, because creatures do that.
Yeah.
There's a noise, there's a sound, there's a light, there's a whatever.
Yeah.
They might be attracted to go check it out, and you just might happen to be like, die, horrid
Yeah.
thing! Oh my god, that kind of stuff. There's another thing trying to eat me.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, probably in fifth, since I started Dungeon Master doing DMing in fifth edition, I'd say it's only about 10 or 20% of the time that the monsters don't know the players are coming.
That is true. They do not. No one will walk stealthily for the entire traveling to wherever they're trying to get to. I don't
Yeah,
think.
we haven't had, I can think of one group of characters we've had that where the whole group is fairly stealthy, and that's the group for the dragon cult story, because you have a
Right, right.
monk and you have a rogue and you have a druid, and none of them are using heavy armor, and there's another couple of characters, but most of the parties aren't very stealthy, like especially like your barbarian, that northern campaign we have for the world of Mir. Those guys all have heavy armor or medium armor. They're all big barbarians, fighters, clerics. So yeah, it's interesting. Where I think back in the day, there were lots of stealthy parties. Um, yeah, it was more of a focus. I think cons. So as we talked about, there some people don't find them that fun, but I think that's part of the point in a way. But I think it's challenging, which is fun. Um, and there is a control issue, I think, where there's more people these days who don't like the fact that the DM has so much control. And that's just how the game is run. And I think it's only to a certain point, obviously, right? Um, there are rules, and the DM is usually following most of the rules. Otherwise, you're not really playing the same game. And I think it's that there's more questioning of authority in our society now, and which I think is good. But there's also boundaries that are necessary for things to operate, and leadership is, especially good leadership, is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's
Um,
the thing with a good DM, they know what their role is. Their role is to basically play God, but at the same time, they're not Old Testament. It's I'm here to do this adventure. I'm here to make it challenging, but at the
right.
same time, you're still a person at the table that you could say, hey, my character's on fire now because I fell into a pit of, I don't know, fire snakes or something,
Right.
and I can't think of a single way to get out. And then the DM could be like, "Okay, great, you're dead," or two, something could happen. Oh, the fire snakes decide, "Oh, it's break time. It's lunch hour. Come on, guys." Fire goes out for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be 100 different things. But the reality is that those who think that the DM has too much power probably shouldn't be playing D&D. They
Yeah,
should
'cause
be.
that's just part of the game. But I mean, for me, I don't think of it as that. I think of it more as myself as a director, and almost like the
Yeah.
players are actors, or the characters are actors in this movie that I'm directing, and that I want to present interesting scenes and challenging scenes and an interesting plot, and then you choose to go wherever you want, and then I have to deal with whatever happens and have to adjust the story, or um, come up with new ways of continuing the overall story and plot. So yeah, that's the way I see it, as more like a director, and the being in charge part is more that, when it comes to making a decision about the rules, that I'm the referee for that.
Yeah.
And that, part of my responsibility, I feel, as a DM, is to make it so it's not boring, and try to involve each of the players as much as I can, and find something for their each for each character. Maybe not every single session, but try to find things that will, involve each of the characters. And that's easier when the player has an interesting backstory, or a more in-depth backstory. It doesn't have to go on and on, but
Well, exactly, and that's something that's really important. And we talked about when we were talking, I don't know, 6 months ago, an episode, whatever. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, but how I, as a player, have learned playing with the players that are in the campaigns that you're running is that some of them are really invested in making sure that there is something juicy for the DM to
Mhm.
look at and be like, you know what? I can work with that. I love that one element there, or the entire thing. Because you've even had run some games where there's an entire backstory that is very close to what the story you've already got running is, and you're like, you know what? I could actually transpose that on top of there. It doesn't
Yeah.
change much, but it adds some flair to, hey, this character that you guys are playing with suddenly has some sort of status with another clan or something or whatever it might be, and which gives such a rich thing and makes it fun for that player as well, because that player then has the responsibility of going, oh yeah, guys, by the way, yeah, my dad's a dragon. I've totally didn't I didn't want to bring it up
Yeah.
because cool things like that can happen.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've really tried to work really hard at doing for the last few campaigns, is that I got to make sure that I have something there, because then otherwise your character is just a 2D cutout.
Well,
And
I think it's kind of relative to a certain degree, though. Like, to me, there is also another modern take about how players there's a good way to be a player and a bad way. I don't look at it like that at all. I look at it like we're playing. It's just a game, and you show
yeah.
up with your character sheet and just play how you want to play. So if you have pages and pages of backstory, okay, maybe there's a lot that I could mine in there and that you can add to your character as you play them. Cool. If it's much more straightforward, that's okay too. Like, it reminds me of extroverts and introverts,
Yeah.
and you know the North American society that we live in, and most of Western Europe, is fairly extroverted, but it looks like at least half the people, maybe even more than half, are actually introverted. And so there's actually lots of ways to play, and I think, yeah, there's lots of ways players can access the game. So we mentioned the cons, some of the cons that people have about traps, which we completely nullified all of their all of their complaints. The pros, I would say, okay, so it makes the game more challenging, and I think because of that, it's fun. That's my take. Um, it gives you more detail, adds suspense, and humor. Like I said, I think sometimes that's not really looked at. But I think it's funny. It's like when you're playing Skyrim and you get too close to a giant, and or you're not high enough level, and one of those giants hits you, and your character just goes flying up into space, and you look at the land below as your character comes flying back down to Earth. It's funny. So some of the things that happen, or you jump from a, jump from some sort of high cliff or a bridge or something. You think you can make it, but your character doesn't, and you see the character like just ragdolling it down in the end. Um, I think there's some humor in that, and like you said, you're walking up the stairs, and then you step on a pressure plate, and you get an arrow right in the face.
That's the best part. I mean, I got it. It's like back when I first played. Was it Skyrim? No, it was Oblivion.
Mm,
And I had played the previous game. I knew where, how the game mechanics generally worked. Went through the whole tutorial, all that kind of stuff. Then I was let out into the world. And I'd never been to this area of Tamriel before. And I thought, I'm going to go to the southern tip, way down there, and check out what that town is about. So I went all the way down. I ran into like the odd creature here or there, nothing I couldn't handle. Then I got to the thing and I got put on a quest. Hey, go that way and do the thing. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to do that thing. My level's pretty like 2 or whatever it was at the time.
mhm.
And then I was just walking along the road, feeling a bit safe. And then I see a tower off to the right. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go to that tower. I go in the tower. There's nothing much there. Then I realize there's a secret door, and I go down. And then suddenly, in this underground layer of some sort, had no idea what the heck was going on. And then I start fighting these dudes, and these dudes all were very unhappy with me being there. And then in the top right hand corner, I see the phrase, "You have now been infected," or something like that. And I thought, the hell was that about? So I finished these guys off, not noticing their eyes were like glowing red. And I thought,
Mm.
okay, blah, 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 kill those guys. And I start walking away, and I'm like, haha, I got some good treasure. Ha 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 ha. And then the sun came out. It's like, you are now taking damage. I'm like, why? Oh, you're a vampire. Sorry. I had no idea. But I didn't freak out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Oh my god, what these game designers did to me. It's like, oh, so I'm this thing. All right, okay, I got to deal with that now. And so it launched me down this like 45-minute direction of how do you deal with vampirism in this particular game. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at the online stuff. It's like, well, you got this, you could do this, you could do that, and that dominated the amount a bunch of time. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to play as a vampire. I'm going to see how that plays out. And took a lot of damage during the day, had to travel at night, but still, it brought some flavor to the game where I just, as a new player, was like, I'm going that way, whatever, and it taught me a lesson that you can do that, sure,
Mhm.
but here's a reason that you might not want to do that every single day. See, all of this stuff, as you and I keep talking about, it's like it's the flavor game. It's all these different things. Whoa. All these different things that you can encounter and deal with, and at the same time, just remember that it is very much a game, and you don't have to freak out and be precious with anything. Sure, be precious with a few things, but really,
Mhm.
overall, just try and roll with it as much as you can, because otherwise, you just either will hate the game or it'll just become boring for you.
Yeah.
And those are kind of the things that I think are really not not things that aren't ever really said. I think that those kinds of things kind of get ignored. But that's just my personal take on it. So yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, people are playing games for fun. So that would be good.
Well, you'd think that that would be a thing, but a lot of the time
Mhm.
it's not. And I'm just going to put this out there. This is a
Yeah.
reminder that it's just a game, because if you otherwise it just becomes life again. What's the point of that?
Time to
any
play.
uh any final words?
Again, this is just actually, it reminded me how much fun these are and to make sure, again, I don't like to overdo it with them, and they have to make sense. So I
Yeah.
have a lot of adventures that take place in the wilderness. Um, I don't just use the dungeon. I don't just use the city. So traps again have to make sense. They have to be in places where, um, yeah, where it would make sense in the story. But it's reminded me again about how fun they are, and especially ones like the. I do really love that countdown one, and part of it I like is that it's not a dangerous one. It's just funny. It's just and it really gets the players confused and very quite anxious, and um, it's a good challenge, but it's doesn't come with any really nasty consequences.
No, exactly. And I mean, that's what I was saying earlier about, those ones like I'm trying to think of the type of machine, a whole bunch of things work together that are not really related, a ball rolling down,
Oh,
knocking over
like a
dominoes.
mousetrap sort of device.
Exactly. Like those kinds of
Yeah,
things, because you're
yeah,
going to have like a really elaborate one and players trying to solve the problem, but
yeah,
all it really does is, rings a small bell at the end or something
yeah, yeah,
stupid.
yeah, yeah. Or the last little part of it is like it tips over like a food bowl for like a small dog. You know,
That's
that's
true.
the last
Mine
part.
mine would love that trap.
Exactly. Yeah, we could use that at this house.
And here too, because
Yeah.
apparently. But everyone, thank you again for watching, listening, hanging out with us for a little bit of time every week, and we will definitely be back next week talking about something cool related to D&D, and we hope you've learned something about traps because they're hard, they're not easy to do, and I think that a little creativity can go a long way. Until next time, bye everybody.
Later.